Hi there and thank you for tuning in. Here's my Nikon D4 and I wanted to give you this video where I talk a bit about how it is to shoot with the Nikon D4, what my experience is after a few weeks. I made a video after a few days and if you haven't seen that one, maybe that's a good place to start. I will post a link to that as I speak here. But the Nikon D4 after a few weeks, the idea is to give you or to bring you as close to what it's like to own this camera. It's not going to be a review as such, because I think review is a big word. You have to cover a lot of subjects. But I just want to give you, while I have it fresh in mind, my immediate observations and what I think of this camera after a few weeks. And it's just going to be me talking like this, so no fancy B-roll, no upbeat music. So if you're looking for that, then maybe you need to check out now. To make a long story short, the D4 is an absolutely fantastic camera. It may be that the world is moving to mirrorless, and it may be that this was one of the last, great cameras in the DSLR series. Who knows? Maybe the DSLRs will stay with us like long play records. It's really difficult to say, but I will say the D4, the build quality, the feel, the haptics, everything about this camera is just from the top shelf, I would say, to make this a very, very short introduction. If you come from the Nikon D700, you will feel home right away, also from the 750. Of course, it is a big and it's a heavy camera, and you have to get used to that. And on that note, I just want to mention I get a lot of questions in the comments, and thank you for all your comments, about whether the Peak Design, the little straps here, they can actually carry such a heavy camera. And I'm happy to report that they can. According to the specs, this little thing should be able to carry 90 kilos, but you have to make sure that if they turn white, you can see they're black right now, but if they turn white, you need to change these little straps here. So that's very important. But otherwise, they should be able to carry 90 kilos. And that's just about my weight. So yeah, I think you're safe. I would also recommend that if you go for the Nikon D4, get a wide camera strap. I also have these leash types, so they're a bit significantly more narrow, but the leash is a good one. Also because, I like the Peak Design system. I'm not sponsored, but I like it because you can take your camera strap on and off very, very quickly. Normally I just put my camera into the back like this. I like to have it in the top so that when I open the zippers here like this, then it's the first I get to. I don't have to open it all, I can just grab the camera, right? But the thing is that it is actually so tall that it's not flush with the top of the camera bag. And that means as this it will sit on my back as I walk around. This is not really comfortable. For the 750, plenty of space, right? But not so much for the 700. You can see it has a little bit the same issue. Though, if you turn it, for some reason, it will just fit. And that's nice. Or you can take the battery grip off, and then of course it will fit beautifully. But the D4, I find that I actually don't put it in my camera bag. I carry it over my shoulder. So, I know perhaps this is not the biggest problem in the universe. But if you have a camera bag like this one, this is the Mindshift. I can put a link to it in the description. But be aware that this camera is so big that it doesn't readily fit into your camera bag. If you want to have the lens mounted, of course you can just take the lens off and flip the camera body. But I like that when I'm out and about, that I have a camera ready, to be used, sitting in the top of my camera bag, so I can quickly get to it. I would say that both the D750 and the D700, in terms of your camera bag, for sure they have an advantage. One of the things that has surprised me the most with the Nikon D4 is that I'm not using it as it's intended. This one is built for speed. This one was made for, wildlife photographers, people who need to shoot things that move very, very fast. So it can take up to 11 frames per second, and it can move all that information very, very quickly to your CF card or your XQD card. But I'm not using it like that, and that you should be aware of when I give you my opinion. I'm actually using this for landscape and for nature photography. And even though I'm not using the camera for what it's best at, I do occasionally get an okay picture of a bird or something in motion, but it's not my forte, to be quite honest. I use this as a general purpose camera for nature and landscape, and I think it does a fantastic job. Those of you who know my channel or seen many of my videos know that I am really reluctant to talk about color rendition, because I saw the video by Tony Northrup where he talks about color rendition and how we are, many of us, unable to actually spot consistently the pictures from our favorite cameras. I can post a link to that one as well. But having said that, and knowing there's a lot of psychology going to this, the colors that come out of this camera are absolutely astonishing. And if you saw my review of this wonderful lens, the 70-200, right? If you saw that one, then you also saw a lot of pictures with, hopefully you agree that they were amazing colors. And of course you can debate whether it's the lens or the camera, but now I have a new lens. This is the 16-35, and that also produces beautiful colors. So I think it is actually the camera that contributes here. I have to take a lot of reservations. I will say I am simply astonished by the colors that this camera produces. I'm also quite surprised to see, because I thought sometimes my pictures look a little bit like a painting, which pleases me very well. And I thought that actually was a trademark of the D700. There's something about the D700, we all know that. But the D4 can actually also produce pictures that look like paintings. And in terms of image sensor and the quality of the pictures that come out of this, I'm simply, this is as good as, I won't say as good as it gets, but it is definitely as good as I needed. I have no complaints whatsoever with regards to the pictures this camera produces. Coming from the D700 here to the left, you have the joystick on the battery grip here. You can see this is the joystick. That you also find on the Nikon D4. And you will also find an additional joystick up here, so that when you shoot in landscape mode, you can reach it here, and in portrait you can reach it here. Whereas on the D700, you can only have the joystick here, right? When I go from the D4 back to the D700, immediately my fingers start looking for the joystick. And that's because it's just a pleasure to work with it. I know people love to hate these little joysticks. I think the reason is that they fall off. That hasn't happened for me yet, but I think these joysticks are really a pleasure to use. Mind you though, if you have small hands, I have fairly big hands. You can see this, I span across 25 centimeters. But if you have smaller hands, I've seen comments that it's actually difficult to reach the joysticks here. So you should test that if you have small hands and you're thinking about the D4, because that could actually be an issue. You can also see that the command wheel here is actually smaller on the D4. It took a little while to get used to. Now I'm not thinking about it, but it is a bit smaller, and you notice that, but not a biggie. What you will notice though is that, and I couldn't really understand why my muscle memory isn't really that bad, but if you look at the plus and the minus sign here when you zoom in and out, you can see that they're flipped. So I came from the D700 where the plus is in the bottom and minus in the top, and on the D4 they're exactly flipped, right? So that's why I'm happy that the D4, especially at night, has backlit buttons, because going back and forth between these two cameras, you end up simply not trusting your muscle memory, and I always push minus when I'm meant to push plus, and the other way around. So be mindful that if you're thinking about buying the D4, or you have the D4 and you want to buy the D700 as a backup camera, whatever your situation is, going back and forth between these two cameras, you will notice that for some reason Nikon has flipped these two buttons. Coming from the D700 with the three buttons you have on top of the camera, the quality, white balance and ISO, they have actually now been moved to the bottom of the camera on the D4. So they sit here, exactly the same buttons. I don't know if that's deliberate or it's just a coincidence, but ISO, quality and white balance. And you have a little LCD, so when the camera is on, you can see that there is an LCD display showing you the values. You can always see what's the current values here. And speaking of that, I think also I said that in the first video, I am so happy that on the D4 I can switch the ISO directly on the command wheel. I don't have to go into the menu system to do that. Super nice. One of the things I like less about the D4 is that you can see, as they have moved the three buttons here on top to the bottom, they have actually also removed a lot of the buttons where you on the D700 here can select both the metering mode and the focus mode just by turning a button here, right? And I like this way of seeing things because it's like on the Fuji, you can actually, without switching on the camera or anything, you can just see what the values are straight away because you have a dial or button that actually, if you want to go to some of the more automated mode in focus, I just have to flick a switch here, right? With the D4, they changed that, and I think in Nikon's defense, that is because the focus system got more advanced, so you got more options, and all of a sudden, this would have been a very busy button with 5 positions. So I actually find that switching autofocus mode here, if you come from the D750, this is not new to you, but instead of having 3 positions down here, you only have 2 between autofocus and manual. And then there is a button you can push. And as soon as you push that one, then you can on the rear command dial switch between continuous and single. And on the front command dial, you can switch between the options that are available. Continuous has the most. So single, auto, 3D, 51, 21 and 9 points, right? So this is an awful lot of options. And of course, that is why I think Nikon has changed this system, right? So yeah, it takes, maybe it's just a question of muscle memory, but actually I was out shooting the other day where a group of swans flew over the water, and it was only by sheer luck that I managed to capture a picture of them with single point focus. I stood there fumbling with all these buttons here. You have to operate 3 buttons here to select the right mode, and I'm sorry to report I failed terribly, but I was lucky to still get a good shot. I really like the D700 way of doing things, but of course I have to, just get used to the way the D4 works. But if you flick between these two cameras, that's another thing where I think you will see that it takes some time getting used to. Another maybe small thing, but these things with ergonomics and haptics and whatnot, they mean a lot if you're out and about shooting all day long, right? But on the Nikon D750, the grip here in portrait mode is actually deeper. You can see that it's like of course, because the camera is, you can take the battery grip off, then there's more room down here, right? Whereas on the D4, it's like they needed the space, so they have sort of extended this part of the body all the way down, and that means that over here, the grip is not as deep here as it is on the D700. It's a small thing, but when you come from landscape to portrait, you immediately notice it, and not so much on the D700. On the D700, you just need to stay clear of this little wheel here, right? But if you do that, then you're good, and then it feels really good. Yeah, a small thing, I just wanted to bring it up. If you're shooting a lot in portrait mode, then this could be something to be aware of. This is my remote trigger for the Nikon D750, and I was hoping to plug it into the D4 somewhere. But there's no place for this one on the Nikon D4, unfortunately. I have to buy a new remote trigger. And the original trigger for the D4 is around €200, which is crazy expensive. So I won't buy one. But I just wanted to bring you up to a general point, that is that the accessories and things you need for the D4, they are very, very expensive. If you want to buy an additional battery, that's expensive. If you want to buy, the XQD card, that's expensive, and so on. Provided that I don't need bulk mode, I can do with the 30 seconds on the D4 here. Of course, I can just take a timer release, and hence I do not need a remote trigger for long exposures. But I just wanted to bring up a general point that I think accessories are expensive for the D4. 10 years ago, this was a pro level camera, right? So maybe the price sensitivity amongst pros is simply less because they can deduct it. But I would say be aware that if you need accessories for your D4, that's expensive. Going back and forth between these two cameras, I would say that one of the things that continues to annoy me with the D700, that is the 95% viewfinder. And maybe you think it's a small thing. To me, it's a big thing, and we are in personal preference territory here, right? I make an effort to, frame my pictures carefully, and I find it really annoying. I have to do post-processing in terms of cropping, because I simply can't see everything that the sensor captures. No, so much on the D4, it has 100% viewfinder, and that is the way I like it. So in that regard, going from the D4 back to the D700, I find it really annoying, to be quite honest. The other thing, as I mentioned, is that I often miss the little joystick here, especially in landscape mode. My fingers continuously keep looking for it, but then I have to use the command wheel instead. Okay, I can hear my neighbor has turned on his motorcycle, so I think it's time to call it quits. I hope this was useful. If you have questions, don't hesitate to leave me a comment or drop a question in the comment section. Happy to see if I can help you. That's the purpose of these videos, is to see if I can bring you as close to what it's like to own a Nikon D4. Yeah, that's it for me. As always, happy shooting. Take care. Bye bye.